Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is April Hayden. I'm a consular officer with the U.S. Department of State, and I'm going to be talking to you today a little bit about the U.S. visa process. Next slide, please. I'll start with an overview of the process. I've got a few statistics to give you, and then we'll talk about resources and where you can go to get good information. Okay, the first thing is, what is a visa? A visa is, as it says here, permission to apply for entry into the United States. It is basically a ticket that you present at the border to be admitted to the United States in a specific visa category. Okay? So the visa allows you to apply for permission to enter the U.S. And then once you arrive to the border at a port of entry usually, then an official from the Department of Homeland Security will decide whether you qualify to enter. Okay, next slide. Okay, this here is called an I-94, and it is actually electronic now, but this here is the record of your entry into the U.S. And this will be stamped by an official at the port of entry with the category of visa that you are applying to enter the U.S. with, and how long you can stay. Now, for student visas, the time that you can stay is called the duration of status. You can see here on this it has J1, which is a category of student visa, and then D/S. So that means that this person was allowed to enter for the amount of time that it took to complete their study, so for the duration of his studies. This now is electronic, and it can be accessed at a website, and your designated school official can help answer questions about this particular documented process. Okay, visa classifications. There are actually three main ones: F, J, and M. And they're different depending on what type of study that you plan to do in the U.S. The F is a student in an academic or language training program. The J is an exchange visitor. There are actually 15 different categories of exchange visitor visas. Some of them are to study, some are to do an internship, for example. Some of you may have gone on summer work and travel, which is a J category. And then the M is for a vocational student or other non-academic student. Okay, who needs to apply for a visa? Anybody who wants to enter the U.S. For the first time in a student category. Anybody who has an expired student visa will need to apply for a new visa. Anybody who entered the U.S. in a different status other than student, and then what has changed status to another one while they were in the U.S. If they exit the U.S. to go back for a vacation or whatever, they will need a new visa to be able to enter cross the border again. Okay. So those are fairly obvious. The not so obvious cases: if you do not maintain your status as a student, or if, for example, you are arrested for something, then your visa is invalidated, and so you will have to go back to your country and apply for a new visa if you want to enter the U.S. again. In other words, the visa that you entered on, even if it's still valid, is going to be invalid because of whatever action happened in the U.S. And then also J1s who are transferring to a new institution will need to have a new visa. Next slide. Okay, and the visa process. The law regarding visas is the same all around the world. It's the U.S. immigration law, but the process for applying for the visa varies around the world depending on what post or what consulate you go to apply in. The best way to find information on post-specific things are at the embassy or consulate's websites, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Excuse me. As far as timing goes, F and M students, you can apply for your visa up to 120 days before the report date that's on the I-20 that you'll get. For J students, there's no regulation defining a time frame, so presumably as soon as you get that DS 2019, you can apply for the visa. But just remember, you can apply for an F visa or an M visa up to 120 days before the report date on your I-20. Next slide. Okay, and applying for the visa. This is maybe the part you're most interested in. The first thing that happens is that you receive an I-20 for your F or M visa, or a DS 2019 for a J visa. This is the first step. You need to have this in order to start the process. Once you have that, and 120 days before the reporting date, you can actually have your interview. So the way that you get an interview is you make an appointment at the nearest U.S. Embassy or consulate. Like I said before, this is done on a website. You complete an application form. It's called a DS-160. You complete that online. You pay the SEVIS fee depending on the type of program you have, and that SEVIS fee, it varies. Can be $25 or typically $200 for an F1 visa applicant. Next thing you need to do is pay an MRV fee, and that is the fee for your visa application, and that's $160. You can go to travel.state.gov. That website there will list all the embassy and consulate websites, or you can just Google U.S. Embassy and then your country or your city. And then after you do all that administrative stuff, then you have an appointment, and that's you can, if you've never had a student visa before, then you definitely need to come for an in-person interview. Some posts have a process where if you currently have a student visa, you might be able to renew without an interview. But if it's your first one, you definitely will need to appear in person. Okay, as I said before, you can apply 120 days before, and that's actually the appointment date. So you can do a little bit ahead of time as long as you have an I-20. But the important thing is apply as early as you can. That way, you're not running up against any close deadlines. Okay, how we decide who qualifies for a student visa. The first thing is that the burden of proof is on the applicant. That means that you need to be prepared to come in for your interview and basically tell your story. Who are you? Each case is unique. The consular officer will make sure that the person in front of them is the person that's reflected in the I-20 or the DS 2019. We'll do that by verifying your identity with your passport. You'll give fingerprints. You'll submit a picture, and we'll just make sure that you're the person that is the holder of this I-20 or DS 2019. The other thing is that we make sure that the story makes sense. And what that means is that the person who's in front of us is a real student interested in studying in the U.S. and maintaining their status correctly while they're in the U.S. And basically we're kind of looking at 4 points. Who are you? What do you want to do in the U.S.? How will you pay for it? And what do you intend to do after you complete your program? So those 4 questions are basically the things that a consular officer is going to ask you. Next slide. Now, when a consular officer interviews an applicant, U.S. immigration law says that we presume that the applicant intends to immigrate. And so during the process of the interview, we determine if that is in fact the presumption or if the applicant intends to do something else. And that's what I mean by what do you want to do in the U.S., how will you pay for it, and what do you intend to do after the program is over. So the consular officer will ask, questions about you, and it's your job to, like I said, tell who you are. You need to demonstrate that you have ties to your home country and that you intend to return to your home country when you finish your program. Okay? Each case is different. It's all very specific. It just depends on how you present yourself and how well you convince the consular officer that you're entitled to the visa class. Some things I would tell you, just sort of for tips, is be prepared. Know why you want to study in the U.S. Know what you want to study, and know what you intend to do when you finish with your with the studies. As far as the school that you attend, the consular officer, it doesn't matter to them. As long as you have a valid I-20 or DS-2019, then that is a good school that you are entitled to go to if you qualify for the visa. So in other words, we're not looking at what school you're attending and making any kind of judgment about the quality of the school. What we're looking for is that you have the I-20 or DS-2019, and that you overcome the presumption of immigrant intent, and that you can articulate the four things that I said earlier. Who are you? What do you want to do when you're in the U.S.? How will you pay for your studies? And what do you intend to do after you complete your program? Okay. Now, the reason for refusal, I talked about this already. 214B is the area of the Immigration Nationality Act that says that every non-immigrant visa applicant is presumed to intend to immigrate. And so the applicant needs to, at the time of the interview, convince the consular officer that he or she does not have an intent to immigrate. And then we're back to what I said about the four questions. Who are you? What do you intend to do in the U.S.? How are you going to pay for it? And what do you plan to do when you complete your program? Okay. Now, 221G is a refusal, but it's a refusal because the applicant needs to submit more information or documents. It's actually a good sign if the consular officer tells you that you're 221G, it means that you have overcome 214B, and the consular officer just needs a little bit more to be able to make that determination if you qualify. Okay. 212E and 212A has to do with ineligibilities, and there are a series of things that could make you ineligible for a visa, and you can see those at travel.state.gov. Okay, denials. If for some reason you do not overcome 214B, or you're ineligible, you will receive an explanation in writing about the section of the law that applies to you. U.S. immigration law also provides that the visa process and the information in the visa interview is confidential. So we're not allowed to share that information with your student advisor or anybody else about your interview. Okay. Now, one thing I would tell you is if you go for your interview and your visa is denied, try to listen to what the consular officer tells you. It's not good news to get, but you could get some potential very helpful information if you decide that you want to reapply in the future. Or you also want to make sure that the denial is 221G, which means that you still have an opportunity to provide the information that the consular officer requests in order to make a final determination. So try to listen to the entire thing that the consular officer tells you, and don't shut down if you hear that word denial. Okay, next slide. Okay, administrative processing. I talked about that 221G, and that's what 221G basically is. It's an administrative processing. It's a term that we use to mean anything that needs to happen additionally in order to determine if that applicant is qualified or not. It's unique to every situation, it's not just one thing that someone is missing, or not just one piece of information that we need. It could be a whole number of different things, and like I said, each one is unique to the applicant. Okay? So pay attention to what the consular officer says to make sure that what he or she needs, that you're prepared to supply. Okay, with the 2013 numbers are not finalized yet, but just to give you an idea of how many visas we issued in the last fiscal year, you can see there that we issued almost 500,000 visas just in the F category alone. The J visas, as I mentioned before, there are 15 categories, and we issued 313,000 last fiscal year. And then the M visas, a little bit less, but 10,000 last year. And the top 10 visa countries, it's basically the same top 10, I assume, next for fiscal year 2013, but you can see the list there. China's at the top. South Korea is always high up there, Saudi Arabia, and you can read on down. Okay. All right, so how can you best prepare for your visa interview? Understand the concepts that I've discussed, like the 214B, what that means. Understand the concept of intent to return home, that is, that you do not have immigrant intent. And learn more about the visa process. Travel.state.gov that I mentioned earlier has a lot of information, very useful information, and it's authoritative, it's comprehensive, and it's true. Okay? There's a lot of information available out on the internet, and anyone can put anything they want on the internet. So if you want to find out the truth, go to travel.state.gov. Okay? Also, another good resource is your school. The school sees, how many number of students every year, and they're very familiar also with the visa process. So they're a good resource, and you should use them. Okay, talking some more about resources. Travel.state.gov has, like I said, all kinds of information, and to include statistics. So you can also go there to see information about student visas and where students are coming from that are issued visas, all kinds of information like that. J1visa.state.gov is another one that has lots of information specific to J visas, which I mentioned earlier. There are 15 different categories. Education USA website is an excellent website for all kinds of information about studying in the US. And then Department of Homeland Security Study in the States website is an excellent website to talk more about what happens while you're in the US. As I mentioned early in the presentation, the visa is permission to come to the border and ask to enter for purposes of study or whatever your visa classification is. Department of Homeland Security website has a lot of information about maintaining your status. It has information about changing status. It has all kinds of information. That's also where you'll find information about the I-94. Okay, so now we'll take questions. I am not able to answer questions about scholarships or specific schools or courses of study or financial aid. My expertise is limited to the visa process, so whatever questions you have about visas, please ask them, and we'll try to answer them. Okay, so first question, can I apply for student visa from Turkey even though I am Syrian? Yes, U.S. Immigration policy is that you can apply anywhere in the world for your visa, so you're not limited to applying just in your home country. However, keep in mind that you need to establish ties to your home country, and it's a lot easier to do inside your country than it is outside. Okay. Okay. Elaborate on transfer of visa status from J1 to F1. Um, okay, visa status, or there's a status and there's a visa. You get the visa, like I said, and you can apply to enter the border and enter into the U.S. for your program. Once you are in the U.S., then you have status. Okay? Now, it's possible to change status while you're in the U.S. without leaving the U.S., and that's something that you do you apply to the Department of Homeland Security, specifically USCIS, it's called. But you're always you can always, in this case, transfer from J1 to F1. You could leave the country, go back to your home country, and assuming that have an I-20 for the F1, you can apply for the visa. Um, and the validity of an F1 visa, um, applicants for an F1 are admitted for duration of status when they have an I-20. And that means that as long as they are fulfilling the requirements of the program, as long as they're in student status, then they are considered to be in status. Okay? That's for an F visa. It's a little bit different for a J visa because depending on the type of visa, they are admitted for the program dates. All right, what is an F visa? An F visa is a student visa. It's a student visa to come to the U.S. and study either language or a degree. It could be an undergraduate degree. It could be any type of study, not vocational study because that's an M visa, and not a J visa because that is an exchange visitor program. However, and it's complicated, I admit, there are people who do study on a J visa, but it's all within the confines of a specific program. Okay? If you want to know a little bit more detail about that, go to travel.state.gov, and it actually has a place where you can answer questions, and it'll tell you what type of visa that you need. Okay. All right, next question. Does student necessarily need to apply to more than one university or college to apply for a visa? No, not at all. As a matter of fact, when you come for your visa application, we're looking for you to, have been accepted at one college at least, and to have a valid I-20 from that college. So, no, we don't expect that you are applying for more than one. To us, it's not really relevant. You come to us because you have an I-20 and you want to attend a particular school, and you have an interview. We make sure that you're qualified, and then we issue the visa if you're qualified. Can I work with an F1 visa? It depends. It depends on where you are in your studies. Depends on a little bit on your school. For that question, you can talk to your designated school official, but in general, the idea is that you are not going to work. I mean, you can't go and get a job at local McDonald's, but there are some specific instances where you can work incidentally to your studies, and there are all kinds of programs. When you finish your studies, there's OPT, it's called, optional practical training, CPT, curricular practical training, but that is after you have either completed your studies or you're towards the end of it. So the simple answer to your question is no, you cannot work. The more complicated answer is kind of depends, and there are some limited circumstances. Okay? But don't expect that you're going to be able to finance your education in the U.S. through work, because that's not the way the program works. Okay. I have a student loan from my previous university experience. Am I still eligible for a J1 visa? This is pretty fact specific, so I'm not really able to address this, but you are eligible to apply for a J1 visa. Okay. Okay, how long is a student allowed to stay in the U.S. after completion of program? Um, the Okay, that one is, I'm gonna have to get back to you. It's I believe it's 30 days. I have to verify that. It might be 60 days, but at least 30 days you can stay after the completion of your program. Um, if you get a job, does the student need to return and reapply for a visa? That depends. It is possible, if you finish your studies, it is possible to change your status to another visa category. And that is something that you could look at the Department of Homeland Security, USCIS. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, they're the ones who adjudicate a change of status. Okay? So it is possible that you don't have to leave the U.S. and apply for a new visa. There is that possibility. Okay, let's see. Okay, an I-20 is a form that is issued to you by an accredited, or accredited is not exactly the word I want to use. The Department of Homeland Security authorizes schools to have international students, and they authorize them to issue an I-20. And that I-20 represents a particular school and a course of study issued to a particular person. And this is like the very base document that you need in order to start the process. This is something that's crucial for you to have in order to apply for the visa, because it shows that you have been admitted to that school, and it shows what program, and it shows the start date. And as I mentioned before, that start date is important because it tells you that you can apply for your visa or have your interview 120 days before that start date. Okay, is it necessary to show all of the financial documents at the time of interview? Look at travel.state.gov and find your specific consulate or embassy, and there they will tell you what kind of documents they want you to have for the interview. As I mentioned before, those things are specific to the consulate or embassy, and just make sure that you look there so you know what you need to take with you. Can I briefly explain the details about CPT and OPT? I could, but you get the information better from the source. Department of Homeland Security website, USCIS, talks a little bit more about that. But just to tell you in general, it's those are training and experience programs that are available to you possibly as you are completing your studies. Okay, so if you receive an I-20 but you're rejected for the visa, that means you didn't qualify for the category of visa that you're applying for. And the I-20 doesn't mean that you're going to get a visa. The I-20 means that you're eligible to apply for a visa. That means that you have been accepted by a school, and like I said, you'll need that to apply. But it doesn't mean that you will get a visa necessarily. Okay. Okay, we'll post the information about if it's 30 days, how many days can you stay in the U.S. after your visa, after your program is completed and still remain in status. So we'll owe you that answer, and we'll get that up right away. Okay? So thank you everyone for participating, and hope you consider further studying the U.S. And thanks for tuning in today.